She stood in the dimly lit room, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting shadows across her face. Her lips curled into a confident, almost smug smile as she leaned closer to the man she believed she had captured completely. "He chose me," she whispered, her voice barely audible, yet dripping with triumph. In that moment, she felt untouchable, as if the world itself had aligned in her favor. Every heartbeat, every glance she stole from him seemed to confirm her victory. She had won. The thrill of being the other woman wasn't new to her, but tonight, it felt different. She felt powerful, almost untouchable, like nothing could shake the pedestal she had placed herself on. Yet, just miles away, the wife, her belly swelling with life, sat in the quiet of their nursery. Her hands instinctively rested over her stomach, fingers tracing gentle circles as if shielding her unborn child from the storm of reality she was about to face. She had always trusted him, believed in their life together, never suspecting the cracks forming beneath the surface. But intuition had a way of whispering truths the heart refused to hear, and tonight, that whisper grew louder. There were hints she couldn't ignore, subtle texts, hushed phone calls, and unexplained absences. Something was wrong. And then she found it, the thing that would shatter the fragile world she had built, an audio recording. Just a few seconds, yet it held the weight of betrayal, a confession she never expected to hear. The mistress's voice, smug and victorious, repeated words that pierced through the calm of the evening. "He chose me." A cold shiver ran down her spine as the realization sank in. The unthinkable had happened. The man she loved had been torn away, and the woman she never thought she would have to confront had declared her victory. She thought she had it all, until one unexpected audio recording changed everything, turning her world upside down in an instant. This was only the beginning, the first spark in a firestorm that no one could contain, a storm of anger, heartbreak, and revelation that would leave every life involved forever altered. The husband was the kind of man who drew people in without even trying, a quiet charm that seemed effortless yet carefully calculated. To the world, he appeared dependable, attentive, and full of warmth. Colleagues admired him, friends sought his advice, and strangers often smiled a little brighter when he entered a room. But behind that polished exterior, there were hidden cracks, secrets he carefully kept tucked away, shadows of deceit that only he knew existed. He had a way of making everyone believe he was honest, loyal, and grounded, yet in quiet moments, when no one was watching, he allowed himself to indulge in desires that he knew were dangerous, even destructive. He was complex, a mix of affection and duplicity, capable of love but equally capable of betrayal. The mistress, on the other hand, thrived on control and dominance. She was confident in ways that seemed almost audacious, manipulating situations to her favor with subtle smirks, lingering glances, and carefully chosen words. Her obsession with winning him wasn't just about desire, it was about power, the thrill of being the one who could steal what wasn't hers to take. Every interaction was calculated, every smile, every whisper, a move in a game she played with careful precision. To her, charm was a weapon, and she wielded it expertly, believing herself unstoppable. She sensed weakness in him and knew exactly how to exploit it, savoring each moment she could assert control over him. The pregnant wife was the polar opposite, a gentle soul who radiated warmth and devotion. Her love was fierce but tender, protective not only of her marriage but of the life growing inside her. She had a quiet strength, intuition that rarely steered her wrong, and an unwavering sense of fairness. Vulnerability made her human, yet it also sharpened her instincts. She noticed things others would overlook, a lingering look, a late-night phone call, a sudden shift in demeanor. Her heart, bound tightly to her husband's, was now wary, sensing the undercurrent of deceit without fully understanding its scale. Their interactions took place across multiple settings, the cozy yet tense intimacy of their home, the public spaces where the mistress carefully orchestrated encounters, and the mundane settings of work and errands where small hints of tension lingered. Each environment amplified the dynamics. The husband's charm, the mistress's control, and the wife's growing unease. Small conflicts, missed calls, unexplained absences, whispered conversations, began to accumulate like storm clouds on the horizon, setting the stage for the inevitable confrontation that would change all their lives forever. Every glance, every word, every secret laid the foundation for a storm no one could escape. It began innocuously, like the start of countless other stories, an unremarkable day that would eventually spiral into chaos. The husband first met the mistress at a work conference, a professional gathering where introductions were meant to be casual, conversations polite, and connections fleeting. Yet, something about her lingered in his mind long after the handshake and exchange of business cards. She had a magnetic energy, the kind that drew attention effortlessly. Her laugh was soft but intoxicating, her eyes gleaming with mischief and curiosity. In the polite exchanges of networking, she planted seeds of intrigue, asking questions that seemed innocent but carried subtle undertones, probing deeper than necessary, testing boundaries without him realizing it. The mistress did not wait for opportunities to come to her, she created them. Every encounter, every touch of the hand during conversation, every lingering smile was a calculated move in her game. She complimented him in ways no one else did, acknowledging qualities he had long taken for granted, and the attention, so different from the comfort of his marriage, awakened desires he had suppressed. Text messages followed, casual at first, professional on the surface, but layered with undertones that hinted at intimacy. Every ping from his phone became a source of thrill, a forbidden fruit he couldn't resist. She knew how to read him, how to manipulate the moments between them until each meeting, each conversation, edged him further from the life he claimed to cherish. The betrayal did not happen in an instant. It was a gradual, almost imperceptible shift. He began arriving home late with excuses that felt rehearsed, growing distant, preoccupied, distracted. The wife noticed the subtle changes, the delayed responses to her texts, the hesitations in his voice, the fleeting expressions of guilt he tried to mask. A small knot of suspicion formed in her stomach, yet she tried to trust him, tried to believe it was nothing, convincing herself it was paranoia. Meanwhile, the mistress sensed the growing divide. She watched his hesitation melt into desire, his defenses crumble under her steady, intoxicating charm. Each secretive message, each carefully timed coffee meeting, each subtle touch reinforced her belief that she had him completely. Texting turned into calls into private meetings in quiet cafes, secluded corners of restaurants, and stolen weekends disguised as work trips. Every interaction was cloaked in secrecy, carefully orchestrated to avoid detection. The mistress reveled in the thrill of it all, whispering to herself with quiet triumph that he had chosen her, not realizing how dangerously close the walls were closing in. And yet, despite her confidence, the wife's intuition never slept. She noticed small anomalies, a lingering scent, an unusual pause, a phone call ending abruptly. Her gut screamed at her, a quiet warning she tried to suppress, but the feeling was relentless, gnawing at the edges of her peace. The tension between desire and loyalty, secrecy and intuition, set the stage for the dramatic collision that would change every life involved forever, a ticking time bomb neither could ignore. She leaned back in the plush chair, one leg crossed over the other, her fingers tapping lightly against the armrest as if keeping rhythm with her own heartbeat of triumph. Her eyes glinted with satisfaction, a small, victorious smile playing at the corners of her lips. "He chose me," she whispered, barely audible, yet it carried weight, a declaration of conquest she felt deep in her bones. In that moment, she was untouchable, as though the universe itself had conspired to hand her exactly what she wanted. Every detail, every carefully orchestrated encounter, every subtle manipulation, seemed to confirm that her strategy had worked flawlessly. She had ensnared him completely, bending his will to her desires, and the thrill of that power surged through her veins like wildfire. Her inner thoughts danced with confidence and cunning. She imagined the moments she would recount to her friends, the envy that would fill their eyes as they realized she had claimed what so many others desired. She replayed the secret glances, the whispered words, the stolen touches, all of it reinforcing her belief that she had won. The husband was hers, fully and irrevocably, or so she thought. Her posture was relaxed but commanding, an unspoken signal that she had dominance over the situation. Every movement was precise, calculated to project control even as her pulse raced with excitement. Yet the audience, those watching the drama unfold, knew something she did not. The delicate web she had woven was already fraying. An unseen force loomed in the background, a pregnant wife whose intuition and determination would soon pierce the veil of secrecy. The dramatic irony added tension, creating a sense of impending revelation. As she whispered her triumph, unaware of the storm about to descend, her confidence became the very thing that made her vulnerable. Every smug smile, every subtle gesture, every triumphant whisper was a countdown, a prelude to the chaos that would shatter her sense of control, leaving her exposed and screaming in disbelief. She first noticed the subtle changes, the tiny shifts in his behavior that seemed almost imperceptible at first. A phone vibrating quietly on the kitchen counter, quickly silenced when she entered the room. A lingering glance at a text he would immediately hide. Late nights at the office that suddenly became urgent projects, excuses that felt rehearsed and hollow. Each small anomaly, on its own, might have seemed trivial, but together they formed a pattern she could no longer ignore. Her intuition, always her strongest guide, screamed at her that something was wrong, even if she couldn't yet name the source of her unease. Emotions churned within her like a storm. Anxiety gnawed at her constantly, a pit in her stomach that grew deeper with every unexplained absence or sudden evasive answer. Sadness weighed on her heart, mingling with disbelief. How could the man she loved, the one she had trusted with her life and the life of their unborn child, betray her in this way? Fear crept into every corner of her mind, a quiet, persistent whisper that threatened to overwhelm her, imagining the worst even when she desperately clung to hope that she was wrong. Pregnancy amplified every emotion, every heartbeat echoing with heightened sensitivity. Every tear she fought to hide, every shiver of apprehension, carried with it the life of the child growing inside her, making the stakes feel unbearably high. Determined to uncover the truth, she began her own quiet investigation. She documented strange behaviors, saved suspicious messages, and even secretly recorded calls and conversations, her hands trembling as she held the phone close, praying for evidence that would either confirm her worst fears or allow her to let go. Every interaction became a test, every glance a clue. She moved carefully, balancing her daily life with the delicate monitoring of the man she had once trusted without question. Even in her careful observation, she couldn't ignore the foreboding sense of what was coming. The confrontation was inevitable. The storm she had sensed in fragments, the whispers, the evasions, the secretive glances, was building, gathering force and momentum. Every moment of secrecy, every hidden truth, only added fuel to the fire. She could feel it in her bones. Soon, everything would explode, and there would be no turning back. The tension tightened around her chest, a relentless reminder that nothing would ever be the same once the truth was fully revealed. The night was heavy with tension, the kind that presses against the chest and makes every breath feel weighted. She held her phone tightly, fingers trembling slightly as she opened the folder she had created just for this moment. The audio recording sat there, innocuous in appearance, a simple file labeled with the date and time, but it carried with it the power to shatter everything. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pressed play, the faint click of the start sending a chill down her spine. The mistress's voice filled the room through the speaker, soft yet sharp, confident yet dangerous. "He chose me," the words repeated, the tone dripping with triumph. For a moment, the silence that followed felt like eternity. The wife's grip on the phone tightened, the proof she had painstakingly gathered now unleashed in a few seconds of irreversible reality. She could almost hear the words echoing, a spectral chorus of betrayal, each syllable striking like a hammer. Across town, the mistress's world shifted in a heartbeat. At first, disbelief painted her face, a frozen mask of denial as she whispered to herself, "This can't be happening, it's not real." But then the panic set in, rising like a tidal wave, uncontrolled and fierce. Her body stiffened, her hands clawed at the nearest surface, and her lips parted in a scream that was half terror, half rage. She had believed herself untouchable, invincible even, and yet the walls she had so carefully built around her power crumbled in an instant. Every calculated step, every moment of secret triumph, now felt foolish and exposed. The husband, caught in the crossfire of revelation, froze. Shame painted his face crimson, eyes darting between the two women whose lives he had manipulated. His throat tightened, every instinct screaming at him to explain, to justify, but no words came that could untangle the mess he had created. Fear surged through him, the fear of losing both women, of being unmasked, of facing the consequences of every deceitful choice. The tension in the room was suffocating, a living thing that coiled around each of them, tightening with every passing second. Dialogue crackled through the charged air. "How could you?" the wife demanded, voice trembling yet edged with steel. "All this time, and you lied to me?" The mistress shrieked, incredulity and fury in every syllable. I didn't know she would find out. I thought I had him." The husband's voice wavered. I never meant for this." But even he knew the words were hollow, unable to undo the irreversible. This was the turning point. The power that the mistress had clung to so desperately was stripped away in a heartbeat. The wife, once vulnerable and uncertain, now held the undeniable truth, a weapon of moral and emotional authority that shifted the balance entirely. The audacity of the mistress, her triumph, and the husband's duplicity, all had been laid bare, leaving the room charged with raw emotion, the kind that could not be ignored, erased, or forgotten. From this moment forward, nothing would remain the same, and the scales of control had irrevocably tipped. The moment she stepped into the room, the air seemed to crackle with electricity. Her hands were clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms, as her eyes locked onto the two people who had appended her world. The husband froze, caught between guilt and fear, his normally composed demeanor shattered by the weight of exposure. The mistress, still reeling from the audio revelation, glared at her with a mixture of disbelief and fury, as though daring her to cross the line she had spent months carefully navigating. "You lied to me," the wife said, her voice trembling at first, then rising with intensity, each word sharp and unyielding. "You promised me honesty. You promised me love. And all the while, you were sneaking around, betraying every part of our life together." Her body shook, not just from anger but from the relentless emotional strain of the pregnancy that made every heartbeat feel heavier, every emotion sharper. She could feel the life inside her, a small, innocent heartbeat she had been trying to protect, now entwined with her rage, her sorrow, and her fear. The mistress's reaction was immediate and explosive. Her shoulders tensed, fists clenched, and her voice cut through the room like glass. "I didn't force him. He came to me. He chose me." She stepped forward, almost lunging, her desperation and panic spilling over. Every carefully maintained facade of confidence crumbled, leaving raw, unfiltered emotion in its wake. The audacity of the wife standing before her, confronting her so directly, ignited a fury she had not anticipated. The husband stammered, words tripping over themselves. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was confused. I didn't want to hurt either of you." But the explanations rang hollow against the backdrop of betrayal. He felt the crushing weight of shame pressing down on him from both directions, the mistress's disbelief, the wife's grief, the emotional earthquake he had set in motion. He had been the orchestrator of deceit, and now the consequences bore down on him with full force. Shouting escalated, voices overlapping, tears streaming, accusations hurled across the room like jagged shards of glass. The wife's heartbreak was palpable, a raw and almost tangible pain that seemed to fill the space. The mistress's panic morphed into irrational anger, each word dripping with venom as she tried to reclaim some semblance of control. The husband's fear was suffocating, a mixture of regret, panic, and realization of the irreversible damage he had caused. Each heartbeat, each word, each glance reverberated psychologically through the three of them, leaving them unsteady, vulnerable, and exposed. The confrontation was no longer about simple betrayal. It had transformed into a battlefield of emotions, rage, despair, guilt, and desperation colliding in a chaotic symphony. The room, once familiar and safe, now felt alien, charged with tension so thick it seemed to constrict their chests. Every second stretched, every accusation lingered, and in that chaos, the true magnitude of the deceit and its consequences became horrifyingly clear. There would be no easy resolution, no clean closure, only the raw, jagged edges of shattered trust and the lingering echoes of hearts broken in real time. The room had finally fallen into an uneasy silence, the echoes of shouting and tears lingering like ghosts in the corners. The mistress, once so confident and untouchable, now faced the tangible consequences of her actions. Her social circles, once filled with admiration and envy, had begun to shift. Friends who had once praised her cunning now offered uneasy glances, whispers trailing behind her as she walked by. Professionally, her behavior had left marks. Rumors of impropriety and recklessness spread quietly through workplaces and networks. Emotionally, she was hollowed out, stripped of the illusion of control she had clung to so desperately. Her nightly whispers of triumph had been replaced by restless nights haunted by guilt and fear, a constant reminder that her victory had been nothing more than a fragile mirage. The wife, meanwhile, moved into a fragile but determined healing process. Her days were filled with a delicate balance of managing her emotions, caring for her unborn child, and trying to reclaim a sense of normalcy in a life that had been abruptly shattered. Tears came often, unbidden and raw, yet slowly they began to blend with moments of quiet reflection and strength. She sought support from trusted friends and family, leaning on those who offered comfort without judgment. Her intuition, once a warning signal, became a guiding force in rebuilding her boundaries and learning to trust again, not just in others but in herself. Every kick from her baby reminded her of life continuing despite the chaos, a motivation to endure and emerge stronger, even as the shadow of betrayal lingered. The husband's internal conflict was relentless. Guilt gnawed at him at every turn, a constant companion that made even the simplest actions feel weighted with remorse. Loss clung to him, not only of the trust and love he had squandered but of the respect and stability he had jeopardized. He replayed every choice, every lie, every indulgence in secrecy, wishing desperately that time could be reversed. Yet he also realized that some damage was irreversible, lessons that could never be unlearned, wounds that could never fully heal. Together, the three of them moved forward into a world reshaped by betrayal. Lessons had been learned, but they came at a cost. Trust, once broken, proved fragile beyond repair. Relationships had been altered permanently, and the emotional scars would remain long after the initial confrontation faded from memory. The fallout was not just immediate, it was enduring, a reminder that choices, no matter how calculated or impulsive, carry consequences that ripple through lives in ways that cannot be undone. Betrayal has a way of cutting deeper than any visible wound. Trust, once broken, leaves scars that are invisible yet unforgettable, shaping the way we see the world and the people we love. Infidelity isn't just a private failing, it ripples outward, affecting hearts, relationships, and even lives yet to be born. In this story, every secret, every whispered triumph, every calculated lie came with a cost, proving that choices driven by desire or ego rarely go unnoticed. The husband's duplicity, the mistress's obsession, and the wife's heartbreak highlight the fragile nature of trust and the immense emotional consequences of betrayal. One cannot help but wonder, would you have confronted them in the same way? Could you have found the courage to face a loved one's deception, armed only with evidence and intuition? Or would fear and uncertainty have kept you silent, letting the betrayal fester in quiet despair? These are questions without easy answers, yet they resonate because they challenge the audience to reflect on their own boundaries, their own vulnerabilities, and their own understanding of love and loyalty. As we leave this tale, the lingering tension remains. What happens after the confrontation? Can hearts truly heal, or will the shadows of deceit continue to shape every choice? The answers remain uncertain, leaving a haunting curiosity that refuses to be ignored. Months had passed since the confrontation, yet the air around them still carried an unspoken tension, a lingering charge that no amount of time could dissipate. The husband, attempting to reconcile with the wife, moved cautiously, his every word measured, every gesture weighed with remorse. He tried to rebuild trust brick by brick, aware that forgiveness would not come easily, and that every step forward could be undone by the smallest misstep. His guilt remained a constant shadow, a reminder that while apologies could be offered, the damage lingered like a scar that refused to fade. The mistress, meanwhile, had not vanished quietly into the background. Her pride and obsession had taken on a darker edge. Rumors of subtle manipulations and whispered threats began to circulate, her desire for revenge simmering beneath the surface. Though she no longer held the power she once believed was hers, she found satisfaction in small disruptions. Moments of doubt she could plant, moments of unease she could provoke, a quiet reminder that her presence still mattered, even if only as a ghost haunting their lives. The wife, stronger now yet still carrying the weight of betrayal, faced each day with a mixture of caution and resilience. She knew that peace was tentative, that life after such heartbreak was never truly simple. Every choice she made was informed by the past. Every interaction, a careful navigation of what had been lost and what remained. And then, one evening as silence settled over the house, a single, unexpected message appeared on her phone, unsigned, cryptic and chilling. "You think it's over, but it's only just beginning." Her breath caught, pulse racing, as the realization sank in that some stories refuse to end neatly. The past had returned to claim its place, and the storm was far from over.